Think beyond traditional business banking. Think a partner that gives you in-depth financial insights.
Well, welcome back. It has been almost 2 years since Facebook changed its name to Meta in line with its strategy at the time to bid big on the metaverse. And the metaverse was sold as a virtual reality where we would be able to do a whole host of things. We'd be able to work there, play there, attend concerts, buy property, fit clothes, essentially all from the comforts of our homes. But the question that we're asking 2 years on is, was the metaverse all hype, or has it actually lived up to its expectations? I'm joined by Kathy Lee, who is the head of AI, data and metaverse at the World Economic Forum, Geneva, as well as Mick Mann, the CEO of Africa Rare, which is or describes itself as Africa's first metaverse. To the both of you, thanks so much for your time. So perhaps let's start at the very beginning with a basic definition. I mean, you ask people what the metaverse is, and it's very interesting to see the different descriptions that you do get of it. Kathy, in your view, what is the metaverse as you understand it to be, or as you understand it to have intended to be?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's a great pleasure. So the metaverse, the way how the forum thinks of it, yes, it could have different, immersive components. It could have decentralized finance as a component, for example. But at the end of the day, we are just talking about the continued integration of our digital and physical lives. And it's not that hard to imagine that the future of the internet, as what we call the metaverse, could be very different from the one that we're seeing now, because over the past 40 years, we've all seen this very radical change to the internet as we knew it. So to summarize, basically, it could have different components, let it be 3D, 2D, decentralized, blockchain. Any of those are possible, but we are simply talking about the continued integration of digital and physical lives.
Okay, so just building essentially on what we already have and what we're doing. Mick, is there anything you would add to that description of what the metaverse is?
Yeah, I think just going along that point is that it's the next wave of computing. It's the next evolution of computing that is more immersive and more engaging. If you think about how much time we spend already on our phones or on our computers, it's just now going to be the next level and the next evolution of our current digital experiences. So how do we, have a more meaningful experience? How do we engage more in these 3D virtual environments, or 2D, as Kathy was saying, either in a centralized or decentralized way? And it creates that sense of being in the room with somebody, rather than being in a flat environment.
Sure. So I want to dial back and use Mark Zuckerberg as a specific reference, because I believe the concept of a metaverse predates what Meta tried to do or is trying to do. But what he did is he gave it a whole lot of hype with all the investments that he was making into Meta at the time, and just talking about it as the next best thing. It seems to have quietened down a little bit right now, the hype around the metaverse. And I'd like to understand, perhaps, Kathy, as you see it, how would you describe the current state of the metaverse and the progress around it that has been able to achieve?
Absolutely. As Mick, pointed out earlier, because the environment, the so-called metaverse, allows us to be more connected, but also more present. It does have the potential to transform how we work, play, socialize, learn, and shop. While the timeline for the metaverse is uncertain, we believe that the necessary technological building blocks and the use cases will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years to bring potentially the metaverse to life. And despite the current market challenges, the long-term potential remains substantial. And this is evident in the investments we're seeing from major companies across the tech industry and startups who continue to proliferate in this space, accelerating in part by also the adoption of the generative AI tools. The metaverse obviously is still in its early stages, with the core technologies platforms continue to evolve, but as we mentioned earlier, that there are many enterprise use cases, particularly focusing on training, simulation, virtual collaboration, remote assistance, virtual events, and digital twins. And this all showcase the potential for immersive technologies to transform how work gets done. For most of the companies, metaverse applications are still experimental pilot projects, not scalable productions. The bigger impact might come in only 5 to 10 years as hardware, software connectivity, and standards mature. But some firms are already seeing a major value in niche applications, particularly in advanced manufacturing, healthcare, retail, media, entertainment industries, and urban planning as well.
The big potential in the in the long term is what you said, Kathy, but some pain points or some challenges in the short term. Can you give us an idea of what some of the challenges are that the metaverse is experiencing and progressing right now?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, which is a challenge we see across some of the major frontier technologies development, and that is the limit of compute, access to computing power. And we all know that to construct this kind of perceived, to be 3D immersive environment takes a huge, enormous amount of computing power. And now we see the same in generative AI in training the large language models, where even some of the major compute, basically the resources are concentrated in the hands of just a few industry players or just a few nation states. So that is a major constraint that we're seeing. Even though with Moore's law now stop, applying to what we've been seeing during the last a few decades. We still believe that major breakthrough will happen, just as the technology has been evolving and developing over the past many decades. So we do believe that breakthroughs will happen, just like large language models will require smaller training data sets and less compute power. We'll also see in the metaverse the construction and development of the metaverse. We'll also see the potentially the improvement in terms of the use of energy and resources. So that will be one major that is the one major challenge and block that we're seeing today.
Mm-hmm. Mick, Africa Rare. Africa Rare. You describe yourself as Africa's first metaverse, and so I'd like to understand through your eyes how you describe the current state of the metaverse and perhaps specifically the state of Africa's metaverse.
Yeah, sure. So we've actually managed to launch a few campaigns for brands. We launched the Nedbank Metaverse for the NGC at the end of last year, which was a golfing aligned with the Nedbank Golf Challenge, and that as a test and learn saw some great success. We had people come and engage with over 21 hours of content. If you couldn't come to the physical game, take part in treasure hunts and live quizzes around your passion for golfing. And then we've also run a number of different campaigns for, as Kathy was saying, for training and for learning experiences, either as open enrollment. We partnered with Peter Diamandis from Singularity University and ran Abundance 360 as a learning, immersive learning experience that we took a space adventure, traveling from, arriving on the space station, going to the moon, learning on the moon, getting in the space shuttle, going to Mars. So it was quite an immersive learning journey. And that we're seeing quite a lot of take up from brands to create these internal ways of learning and engaging with their teams in a new way that really is a experiential learning. And then we have a number of brands that are launching other campaigns. We're going to be announcing a new brand on Monday, actually next week, that will be launching their metaverse experience that will allow users to come and engage with their content and take part in games and fun experiences around the brand. So I think one of the big challenges we're facing, besides the compute power, which I think is a major component, and we are developing for mobile first, so that it, auto detects your connectivity and your type of device, and it might lower the resolution, but you can still access the 3D environment from a mobile device. But I think part of it is also around user adoption and changing behavior of users. Because as we saw when COVID arose and came into our lives, just jumping on a Teams call or Zoom call was so foreign to people. And it was such a behavioral change that, some people were saying, I'll never be on a Zoom call or Teams call, but they had to learn that very quickly because of the situation. So I think that, as users become more comfortable jumping into these 3D environments, we're going to see an explosion of user adoption. And we've already launched, we've got meeting rooms. You can go and book a private meeting room for your colleagues in 11 Africa-inspired meeting rooms, and various other 3D experiences that are live currently, like art exhibitions or small retail stores for individuals to actually list their own digital assets that can be physical or digital products that they can sell in a new type of 3D way. And also, just to add to the idea of artificial intelligence, is that it's accelerating this growth of the metaverse. So I think, there was big hype around the metaverse, and then AI sort of disrupted and took center stage. And now it's how are you embracing artificial intelligence into almost every application, whether it be metaverse or any industry, to accelerate the growth of that industry. And, we've built in already, we've got Matwetwe in the chat. You can chat to an AI being in Ubuntu land in Africa Rare. And we're building out these sales agents to assist for store owners to have an AI sales agent in Ubuntu land.
Sure. And I'm glad that you raised the topic of AI, because I wanted to understand perhaps whether the hype around AI and all the innovations around ChatGPT and all that had displaced what was happening in the metaverse. You say that it was the case, but right now we're seeing how AI can be accelerated or adopted further in the metaverse. I want to park the AI conversation for now, though, and I want to circle back to some of the constraints to adoption that you highlighted, and it was constraints around the change of behavior of users, and it is your hope and expectation and belief that the behavior towards, a response towards the metaverse will improve going forward. But the example that you mentioned regarding Zoom, and how initially we had a bit of concerns around Zoom, but then we had to Zoom because that's all we could do at the time. Right now, what is happening post the pandemic is that human behavior is tilted towards more the physical. They want to experience things. They want to be at those physical meetings. They want to be at those meetings. They want to actually go and shop at the actual store, or as it were. And I just want to know what you think that could potentially have to the ambitions of further adoptions of the metaverse. This competing interest right now for human behavior and for humans to actually want to physically experience things.
Yeah, so I think the metaverse helps answer that question, because you are in a 3D environment. So you feel like you're with people. We have all of our meetings now in our meeting rooms. We don't meet in Teams and Zoom. And when somebody talks on the left of you, you actually look at them. There's a much greater sense of presence that the metaverse creates that we don't have now from these 2D platforms like Zoom or Teams, which I think that answers a lot of that idea of connecting people from different regions or geographies. Sometimes it's too expensive to take a flight, but you could be in that 3D environment, and you can bring up your webcam, or if you're wearing a headset, is sort of the most, and a bodysuit, which will come in time. So you actually feel like you're there. You've got the sense of touch, and you have the whole performance. So if you turn your head, your avatar head turns. And as human beings, we think in physicality. So we remember if somebody was sitting across the room from me more, when there's than being in a flat environment.
Okay. I think I needed to have been in one of your meetings and have experienced the metaverse ahead of this conversation, perhaps to a bit understand what is going on right now. But Kathy, with the little understanding that I do have, I want to circle back to the point that Mick was making around AI. And in his view, yes, there was a time where AI was perhaps displacing some of the progress that was happening in the metaverse. But right now, the conversation has progressed to how can artificial intelligence and generative AI complement the developments of the metaverse. Is that your view as well? AI being complementary rather than a competing factor in the metaverse unravel?
I would agree with that, and I will go even further by saying that AI has been the missing piece of the metaverse. Because again, if you take the view of the metaverse being the next iteration of the internet, it doesn't need to be the shape and form that we're talking about now, because humans are famously for always predicting the future in a way that's not as accurate. But one thing we know for sure is that, to your point, that as humans, we long for social contact. That's how we differentiate with many other similar beings out there. So the metaverse has never been about replacing what's happening out there. And I will also encourage for all of the viewers out there to think about, it could be back to my point earlier about being the continued integration of physical and digital lives. It could be about continue living in this analog world that as we love, but you send, for example, a robot going to a store, or you rent a robot that's rented out by the store and pick up those groceries for you. For whatever the reason, you don't want it to be in the store there by yourself at that time, but you could remotely control this robots to do those things for you. And that's also a form of metaverse. And then back to AI, think about, what foundation models could do. Right now, we are looking at some of the large foundation models that's been published by some of the most established industry players and startups. But in the future, it's not that hard to imagine that we could have personalized AI trained purely on our own data. And that AI could go out representing you, maybe in the form of avatar, to interact with each other, to basically complete a lot of the tasks that no longer need you as a physical being to do it by yourself. Again, we're not saying a forced behavior change, because that is definitely not what the internet, what the metaverse is hoping to achieve. It's really just about acknowledging that we live more and more our lives online in digital forms, and in the future we will need to be bold in terms of predicting what that might look like. And then that's exactly how the forum has been looking at the metaverse through the lens of the future of the internet. And if we want that internet to be more or less in a more ideal state compared to the one that we know now, where we know there's a lot of challenges related to misinformation, disinformation, harmful content, privacy, and IP challenges, then we need to think about what kind of future we want it, and then basically work backwards and really strive to put a lot of the guardrails, foundations in the construct of the future of the internet. And that's why the forum launched the Defining and Building the Metaverse initiative back in 2022, leveraging this kind of peer-to-peer cross-sector collaboration, convince a community of more than 300 experts from across public and private sectors to basically set the parameters of a transparent, inclusive, equitable, and responsible virtual worlds and the metaverse, and really strive to put those building blocks such as around the privacy, security, safety, interoperability. What kind of identity do we want it to have in the future version of the internet, and what do we need to do now to make sure that we have a more ideal state of the future digital worlds?
So at what cost is my next question, Mick? I mean, you were talking about the fact that, you put your headsets on, you put these bodysuits on, or whatever physical devices that connect you to this world. I mean, we've seen some of the physical devices coming out, and they have not been cheap. And so I'd like your take on the cost factor, and to the degree that the costs of some of these headsets could actually be a inhibitor to what the metaverse is trying to achieve, and I'll even take that further, could actually be a factor that exacerbates some of the inequalities that we are experiencing right now between the rich and the poor.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, is that there's a lot of hype, around this new Apple Vision Pro that's coming and how that's going to really disrupt not just, virtual reality, but also various other industries like TV screens, because you won't need a TV screen if you have your Apple Vision Pro on in 4K resolution. So, but it does come at a very hefty price. But as we've been teaching through Singularity University over the last 8 or 9 years, is that any technology goes through the cycle that it becomes digitized, then there's this deceptive phase that nothing's really happening, then it hits the knee of the curve, it disrupts, it dematerializes from the physical world, it demonetizes and it democratizes. So as technology goes on this path, it becomes free and abundant for all. So at the moment, it is prohibitively expensive when the Apple Vision Pro comes out or some of these headsets. But it will definitely change over time. And that's why I think Kathy Lee was saying 5-10 years. But for us, we are trying to focus on how to make it accessible now for people in Africa as a mobile-friendly solution, so that you can at least start becoming an architect of the future rather than a passive observer and watch things go by. We want Africa to take part in this next story of the evolution of the internet. So, for us, it's really about how do we make it accessible? How do we get engaged? How do we become leaders through learning and through practice in the metaverse?
All right. A fascinating discussion, but something tells me that it's not completely over, although we have reached the end of this segment. But to the both of you, thanks so much for the fascinating insights, essentially telling us that the metaverse is not dead right now. It's still very much alive, and there's still a lot that is going on from innovations in sports, training and learning, as well as other human experiences. But Kathy, we'll leave it there, ma'am. Thanks so much, Kathy Lee. She's the head of AI, data and metaverse at the World Economic Forum, as well as Mick Mann, a CEO at Africa Rare. There you go. If first you don't succeed, try and try again. But the point that you made was absolutely wonderful, to say that it's trying to solve the problems now and how Africa can essentially be the architect of the future it wants to see, whether that future is more in the digital and virtual realm or in the physical realm. But that wraps up this week's Power Table.
Think beyond traditional business banking. Think a partner that gives you in-depth financial insights.